Well, this is Broadway and Breakaways, but a part of me thinks it should be Barnum and Bailey because now it just feels like I'm covering a circus. I'm trying to sit here and get excited about my favorite hockey team, and every 2 weeks, I think, okay, here's maybe what needs to happen. Here's what will happen. Here's what could happen that would give us optimism. Here's what will likely happen. And every 2 weeks, I feel like I continue to come back to that here's what will likely happen, and it's not good. And thanks again, everybody, for joining again for a great, hopefully not too depressing Broadway and Breakaways episode. Not depressing for anything personal, just because the Predators have really given us a lot of fodder and content for that direction. But I want to touch base on where we left last time, the GM hunt. That's the big question that needs to be answered before the season, the offseason kicks into gear. And we're really approaching like the absolute last minute, it feels like, to get this position filled with the draft just over a month away. And then I want to discuss a little bit more on the playoffs and the draft prospects, first round draft prospects for what the Predators could look at 10th overall. And as the summer goes on, we'll continue to maybe go into a little bit more depth throughout the rest of the draft. But there's so much variability in this year's draft, and there's a lot of unknown. So it actually is kind of fun to think of what the Preds could do at number 10. As a disclaimer, this is being recorded on this Saturday, the same day as Game 6 of the Sabres Canadiens. So that game has not happened. We'll mostly focus when it comes to playoff discussions on the conference finals and their predictions, regardless maybe of who wins or of the different scenarios for Sabres Canadiens. But it's still been, that series has been wildly entertaining. Can't really say the same about any of the other conference finals. Let's jump in, though, for now, to the GM conversation. This is now just becoming an absolute clown show. Absolute clown show. Multiple GMs have been hired around the league. Another has been added to the list since we last chatted, with the Canucks hiring Ryan Johnson. Now, it was an internal hire. They added the Sedin brothers as, I believe, senior VPs of hockey. And in some ways, that feels exactly like a Nashville move. Hire the guy internally. Again, this team has been bad, Vancouver. And then they hire two of the three greatest players in franchise history, with Roberto Luongo being probably the other one that would fit the bill there. So, good for Vancouver. They filled their spot. Is it a good hire? We'll have to wait and see. Nashville, though, still remains this elusive, who are they going to hire? For those who follow Elliot Friedman, you've seen that all he can talk about when it comes to the Preds is, I don't know. He says, I keep hearing this, I hear that. There was a rumor that Darren York, who was with the Hurricanes, and he's the GM for their AHL team and assistant GM for the Canes themselves and all of their draft strategy. There was a rumor that he was in Nashville. That's now been debunked. All of a sudden, Tom Fitzgerald, who last time we spoke seemed like he might be a leading candidate, well, that's stalled. And I will say, as you heard me mention in the last episode, that it's a good thing. Tom Fitzgerald is way too much of the Predators' way. It's way too much of, how do we repeat and stay within our lane? This team hasn't won a playoff series since 2018, and they've only left the second round once. This is a team that needs to get out of their lane, need to enter a new one, which both applies to sports as much as it does to life, too. When it's time for change, you need to embrace it. And I think that every Nashville fan across the board, especially in a lot of the X groups, by many famous Preds ones on there, famous within this community, I should say, like Preds Muse, Angry Preds fan. You all know who you are. If you're not following them, they are great follows for their content. A little snarky, a little pessimistic, but very, very accurate and analytically driven. And Nashville is now approaching, they're closer to 4 months than they are 3 months from when Barry Trotz announced that he would be leaving. The draft being in, just over a month makes this a really precarious decision, because when we start talking about the draft, we're talking about it as ourselves, as a neutral party. We're not, as in, we don't have access to as much data and interviews, etc. But we are not undergoing a transition the way the front office will be. So it's really, especially when this draft is so complicated, so volatile with where things could go, it's frustrating to know that we don't know who's making the decisions. So where do things stand now for the GM search as of Saturday, May 17th? All we know is one extra bit of information that has sort of been circulating is that the Predators are apparently losing out on some candidates because of lowball offers. They're not paying enough. And it's sort of surprising to me that an ownership group involving Nick Saban and the Haslams would take that issue, take that strategy, unless they are under the firm belief that GMs are overpaid and that GMs are not as required. And if so, I would love to talk to them and learn why. There's no question Nick Saban's a winner. He knows how to build a competitive team and organization. He's never done it in hockey. The GM is crucial. You cannot just get around on trades, free agency signings. Trades are great. Look at what Florida was able to accomplish. And they made a couple good free agency splashes too. But they're a very homegrown team, or they got guys at a very early stage who, when they were able to trade for them. And you look at the teams that are most successful right now: Carolina, Colorado. Those are very homegrown teams. And now as they've gotten, they have built, arguably Colorado at least, a dynasty. Carolina, no, because they still haven't won a cup. They might not ever at this rate under Brindamore, but they've still been kind of the Eastern Conference powerhouse. And all of their talent, for the most part, is homegrown, except for when they choose to say we're going all in at the deadline, and they just add a few more guys back. Even guys like Nazem Kadri are back on the Avs. So it's going to be a long few years ahead if the Predators want to win longer term and quit trying to piece together that 8th seed entry. Several episodes ago, I pointed out how the front office has declared that they plan to compete to win in 2026-27 season. My first question was, who is making that statement? Because we still don't know who's running the front office. My second was, this has to be a lie. Like, how are we lying to ourselves? The production hasn't been there. The defense has been bad. UC Saros led the NHL in regular season saves. Many people would say, wow, that's amazing. But this is where understanding analytics and context comes into play. First of all, having the most saves does not mean he had the best save percentage. We don't know how he handled in high danger versus low danger situations. But that's not the most important part. Having the most saves, when he didn't even play any more games really than any other starter, means that the defense let in so many pucks that they weren't able to break up plays. They let in long possessions, no blocks, and massive holes for 5-on-5. And Saros did not have his best year by any means. There were times when Justus Annunen was the guy that we were riding, and he got hot when Saros was not. And that was just a big benefit that the Predators had a backup. They used to have another backup who wasn't actually quite as reliable, ironically. Scott Wedgwood, though, who's now the starting goalie for the Avalanche and has a very real shot to win the Stanley Cup. Probably the favorite still right now. So the defensive issue is something that Nashville does not really seem to have a fix on. They're lucky that they have some guys in Milwaukee. They had Ryan Ufko there for a lot. Tanner Melendijk, he's still figuring it out. A few others that are still coming up the pipeline, but they haven't proven to have an immediate splash yet. Ufko was nice in his first few games, And another big issue for the Predators is that they are heavy on lefty defensemen. There's not a healthy, I should say, reserve of right-handed defensemen that are coming up. And I think that's going to end up being what they try to focus on a lot more in this year's draft. So I even mentioned in the last podcast I would talk a little bit more about Milwaukee in any episode to follow. The Milwaukee Admirals being the Predators minor league affiliate, the AHL, and they've actually had some good runs in the playoffs in the last few years, but in large part that's because the Predators have taken up some of their best players from Milwaukee. They get some NHL experience, they go back down, and then they make a run. Because Nashville sort of had these guys that are maybe a little too good for the AHL, but not really good enough yet to stay in the NHL. And this year was even worse. They were bounced in 3 games. They didn't last anywhere. There's no experience for these young guys to continue to play in somewhat more important games. So after all of these years too, where we've probably seen a little bit more of a propaganda train about, oh, look what we have going on in Milwaukee, that all of a sudden there's nothing to even look at. There's nothing to watch, nothing to see. We had called up Brady Martin for the playoffs, barely gets any action, clearly not impactful enough. And as you see, like when you look through their roster, just a huge gap around right-handed defensemen. Now, that's not Nashville's only issue. By any means, they are lacking center depth. They might have had the worst line of centers by the end of the year. They moved Matt Wood into playing center, and he ended up playing quite well, but that's not where they intended to use him. Ryan O'Reilly was easily their best center, and they had a chance to trade him, never did. And he's in his mid to late 30s. And we're relying on that as our best center for a team that needs to be in a full rebuild. However, as we pivot more towards this draft conversation, there needs to be the split focus, as many teams always go through. Do you focus on best player available or team need? I think in Nashville's instance, there are a couple huge needs that they really can look for best player available. They could look for a forward / center or a defenseman. In this year's draft, a goalie is not expected to be taken quite as high as maybe in other rounds. The last time the Predators were really faced with this discussion and this challenge was in 2021 when Yaroslav Askarov was on the board at 11. And Nashville did not need a goalie yet. UC Saros had just taken over from Pekka Rinne, but Askarov was considered the Dominik Hasek of the next generation, the guy that, he's extraordinarily mobile, very great hand-eye coordination. And Nashville went for him at 11. And I think it was exciting. Obviously, it didn't really pan out because they ended up trading him to San Jose. But in that same vein, whoever is the GM for the Predators, I think will take this with a best player available. With that said, looking at the way that what's in front of them, I've looked at numerous mock drafts, numerous prospect rankings. And even though I still think Gavin McKenna will be the guy that goes to Toronto, just yesterday, John Chaika, who's the new GM for the Maple Leafs, has said that they are really eager to look for defenseman help. Well, that's sort of awkward for Nashville because of the best players who are likely to be available at 10, it seems more like some of the top forwards might go first. So who are those? Well, of course, like I said, Gavin McKenna. And then right below him, like 1A, 1B, is Ivar Stenberg. And neither of those players will be available at 10. If they are, then it might be a little bit like an LA Tolvanen situation way back in, I think it was 2017, where people didn't know why he was dropping so much. And turns out that there were a little bit more off the ice issues with his academic performance, his ability to kind of still be the right team player. There are still, though, the way that the rest of the defensemen are ranked is still very up and down, except again outside of the top two. So Keaton Verhoff and Chase Reed are considered one, again in this context 1A, 1B. For those who have not done a lot of reading yet on the draft, and I'm still, now that the season's officially over, I'm still continuing to get more information. For those who are familiar, or I actually for those who are not really as familiar, when it comes to hockey draft prospects, you don't have as much of like a standardized data set to compare players against. Like for instance, in college football, college basketball, you can generally know that someone who put up in who played in the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12, it's fair game to really compare their statistics to each other. If someone plays in like a pretty bad conference, but they're putting up monster numbers, like setting records, that's also pretty impressive. Here, though, we have guys playing in college, in high school, in international leagues, and pre-professional outside of the U.S. So it's very challenging to really draw like a good map, I should say, as to what is really the right answer. Like, is there a good way of qualitatively and quantitatively scoring these athletes? And, when it comes to top defensive prospects, most of them still are going to take some time in the minors. They will go to the AHL. They will play some in Milwaukee. But look at a guy like Matthew Schaefer, who just comes up and explodes for the Islanders. That's what a lot of teams think they would be getting with guys like Verhoff and Reed. That's also why I'm not sure they're going to be there at 10th. In a lot of the mock drafts that I've seen Nashville actually projected to get a forward because many people think that some of the top 4 defensemen will go in front of number 10. And in some ways, that's because outside of McKenna and Stenberg, this isn't exactly like a powerhouse first round draft. There's not a few years ago, the top 3, I think when the Leo Carlson, Adam Fantilli draft, like everyone who was drafted in the top 3 there absolutely could have been the number 1 almost any other year. Maybe Kevin McKenna is still number 1 this year, but they still have that type of impact. And now there's a lot more that's kind of up in the air. So there's been conversations that does Verhoff, who was originally projected, before the season started to go top 4, now some people think he's going to go 9 to 14. Bleacher Report has him going at 6th to the Flames. And then instead they have the Predators taking kind of in the tier 2 defenseman, Daxton Rudolph. Other names that I've seen linked in that same position, who would be right-wing defenseman, Ryan Lynn. And they have good comps to great players in the NHL. But that's all they are right now, are comps. So I think that when it comes to going with this 10th overall pick, Nashville needs to be a little bit more confident in the return. Keep in mind that last year they drafted Brady Martin over Porter Martone. I've hammered this home numerous times. The other guys here with Don't Puck with Media tease me about it because Alex Burnett, big Flyers fan, got to reap the benefits of Porter Martone. He might feel a little bit differently now that they got swept in the second round, and instead they're going to probably keep Rick Tocchet, commit to the sort of team that the Flyers had. And if you asked him a few months ago, the Flyers were in major need of disrepair. But all of that to say, this kind of ties back to the same problem with the GM. Who defines what a home run is? Who defines the safest, best pick at 10? 10 is really confusing when there isn't a clear best set of players that are going to go somewhere. Not everyone is mocking Gavin McKenna to the Maple Leafs, which was sort of a surprise to me. Not everyone is even having Stenberg go too. For instance, the same Bleacher Report mock draft has Chase Reed, who is a very offensively gifted defenseman, would go to the Sharks. Probably makes sense. Sharks have a lot of good young scoring talent, need some more defensive help. But when you have a player, when Gavin McKenna and Ivar Stenberg are sort of considered this gold standard, it's a little, and that's a really tough one for do you go best player available or who's the best fit. And do Chase Reed and Keaton Vierhoff, do they both play in next year as much as people think they do? It's really hard to tell. There have been so many great prospects that get drafted and you expect that you're going to see them and then they struggle in the AHL. They might get called up, play a little bit, get sent back down. You need to monitor too that these guys don't get exposed too early where they lose their confidence. There have been some remarkable first games ever. Austin Matthews, I think, had a 4-goal game. Thomas Hertl, I think, as well. At least hat tricks in both of their first games. And then they never looked anywhere else. They just dominated, some more than others. Okay, so that's sort of the defense. And I'm in a chat with some other Nashville Predators fans, and some people they say, I'd be fine if we get Ryan Lynn, who many people are projecting, I'd say closer to like 13 to 20 in the draft. But if they could still get an aggressive center or winger. And the name that's sort of been tossed around is an interesting one because this name has really seen a lot of variation on his projections. Viggo Bjork. Viggo is not even 5'10", but he is strong and he's aggressive and he's playing right now in the Worlds and has been playing pretty well. And people seem very excited about him, but I think there's a lot of concern about his size. So in some of these mocks also have him in the top 10. To me, that's one where if I'm Nashville, I'm really hoping that we don't take a flyer at 10. If he's available at like 25 and you want to trade up, Nashville, because of the Tanner Jeannot trade and now with the Michael McCarron and Cole Smith trades, they have some more draft capital. They could afford to use the draft capital and get good younger players now if they believe there's value there. And value is a whole other conversation because just because the first round might not be as top heavy does not mean there are not steals that Nashville can look for. For instance, Aiden Fink, 2023 7th rounder, has signed his entry-level contract with the Predators. People got pretty excited at the end of the year that maybe there's a chance he'd even join. He did join the team for the last game. This is a 7th rounder. So again, I'm not saying Viggo Bjork is bad. I'm just saying if you draft him at 10th overall, you want to expect 10th overall production. If you can get him at a better value, that's what you should target. One thing that's actually a little bit lucky based on the way that the playoffs have progressed is that Vegas, by making it to the conference finals, the 3rd round pick in 2027 that they had promised Nashville has now become a 2nd round pick in this trade for Cole Smith, which is unbelievable. Like, for all of the faults that Barry Trotz had, managing to get a 2nd round pick next year for Cole Smith is bonkers. This is a guy that at best is a 4th liner who can play some penalty kill time. Vegas has made the draft conversation also a lot more interesting. I got a little bit worried when I saw that the NHL said that Vegas has lost its 2nd round pick for 2026 because I had to remember which year the Cole Smith trade was for. Vegas has decided, because they have John Tortorella, who acts a little bit like he runs the show everywhere he goes, that they don't need to talk to the media, that he can do things his way. So what did they do? No one came out to address media questions after Game 6. There was already a warning given after minimal media engagement. I think it was after Game 1 or 2. And the NHL said, we're done screwing around. You lost a 2nd round pick. And they're expecting the Knights to appeal it in person. I don't know if they'll be successful. I don't really. This is unprecedented in the sense of I've never seen a team so actively refute the laws of the NHL. When you take a step back, you have to remember all of these leagues are entertainment leagues. They're not pure competition where guys are paying to join and they're the client. The customer is the fan. The customer is us. It's anyone who it's even the media networks that are absorbing that content because they're sort of the middleman here to get it out. So when Tortorella starts acting this holier than thou attitude, yeah, it's going to be punished. And I think, and he also got a $100,000 fine. I don't know if I'm in Vegas front office, how you handle that with Torts. They brought him in with 13 games to go in the regular season. So he's clearly been good for them. Their offense has gotten a lot better. They were kind of hot garbage. I didn't even know if they would make the playoffs. So it's hard to argue that he's been successful, but there are limits. The leagues are still like there's this I mean it is written, but in some ways it's also unwritten that you still participate in league activities. Even Marshawn Lynch, who's famous for going to press conferences and answering every question with "I'm just here so I don't get fined." Tortorella could have done that. That still would have been compliant. So it's just frustrating when you watch other guys think that they're so above the law. And in many ways, I'm also actually thrilled that Vegas is losing their pick. Vegas has had so many draft picks in their history because being an expansion team didn't have to give up a player to Seattle. When Seattle became an expansion team, they were using their plethora of draft picks to make absurd trades. They traded like 3 for Tomas Tatar, a first, second, and a third. And it just felt like they were throwing away all these empty picks. And now they get really punished for this cockiness. Nashville fans generally are still rooting for everyone except for Vegas. And I think if you are a Nashville fan and you haven't decided, you should root for everyone except for Vegas to finish out the series again, or the series that will be starting this week against Colorado. By Colorado against Vegas. And the reason for that still lies in the sense that Vegas was gifted a much easier expansion draft. They've had a lot more success. They've never really seen what struggling looks like. They've missed the playoffs 1 year, already won the cup, been twice, and are 4 games away from going again with not even the best team remotely in franchise history. With that said, Colorado isn't exactly my favorite team either. They have absolute studs because they got lucky with the way the lottery shook out. They were bad for several years, but they have a dynasty now. They've won their cup. They lost like 3 games on their way to winning that cup. They've only lost 1 game so far, and that was to the Wild. And they really should have lost at least one other game, which was game 6. They were down 3-0, and the Wild just couldn't close them out. So there's something annoying, I will say, about how good Colorado is. I think 17 different guys have scored in the playoffs. Nothing's not working. Even Scott Wedgwood looked good playing for Colorado, and he couldn't look that good for us in Nashville. On the other side, you got Carolina, who is your mirror of Colorado, but hasn't been able to close it. I know Brind'Amour is chasing that so hard. So hard. And crazy stat of the day is Rod Brind'Amour has been a part of every single playoff victory in Hurricanes history except for 2, as either a player or a coach. And his intensity has not waned. His passion hasn't waned. But there seems almost to be a curse on that team where they're so explosive in the regular season. They've got a great set of young forwards, not as young now, maybe average age, but they still can't finish. It feels like they get overperformance from their goaltenders. Their forwards score some clutch goals. Their defense is a very much bend don't break, but they haven't, honestly, in this playoffs, they haven't really been challenged yet. They had Ottawa, and then they had the Flyers, who were so overperforming. So I think that whether they're playing the Sabres or the Canadiens, and at this point, whenever you're listening, we'll see who wins. It is going to be a bit more of a challenge because both of those teams have elite offenses compared to their other talent, particularly though Montreal, who is scoring well over 3 goals a game. And that's why, I'm going to go with my gut prediction that the Canadians close it out in the Bell Center. I think it's going to not even be close. They have a chance to clamp it down at home. They need to win it. They didn't do that last time against the Lightning. That game was ugly. That game had no shots on goal from either team. This series has been the opposite. Once games 1 and 2 kind of got figured out, Montreal returned to form with their offense. They blew them out in Buffalo, and they're back in scoring. I think even if Buffalo does manage to win this game, go back to Buffalo, Montreal has still been the better team. Either way, it's going to be a tall task to take on the Hurricanes. They're also sitting on a lot of rest because they've only had to play 8 games. They're the first ever team in the Eastern Conference to go 8-0 to start the playoffs. Is rest versus rust? I don't know. I'm not going to get into that on this podcast. We'll just allow the series to play itself out. I think it's going to be like a very fun one. It's Carolina's been around a lot. There's still a lot of people love them, a lot of people hate them. I will be rooting for whoever is not Carolina. The rationale for that is a little bit similar to the Vegas take, in that Nashville is a Southern hockey team. Carolina is a Southern hockey team. I think that Nashville should be the first one to really get to put its imprint on the league. And it's also a little bit frustrating that Carolina has been so good, to be honest. Like I can't come up with a good excuse to say, well, it was unfair, at least for the way Vegas got treated. Carolina hasn't had anything like that. They've been amazing. Since 2019, they've been so good. They've gotten better. They haven't been able to really go the distance, but it is absolutely jealousy. Not going to deny it. Absolutely not going to deny it. So in a perfect world, we're looking at winner of Buffalo Montreal playing the Avs. And I said a few pods ago that I always like to root a little bit for the U.S. teams that are left to keep this 33-year streak alive of no Canadian Cups. Might have to make some exceptions this year because it really would pain me to see anyone other than the winner of the Sabres Canadiens winning this cup. I love the idea that two teams who have been in sort of like forever rebuild. The Canadiens, it's only been a few years, but Buffalo for sure, getting in and being able to sneak up and just glide past the Hurricanes, who have not ever done a formal restructuring of their core since they got good. I mean, why would you? But they've still struggled to find the goalie at all times who's going to be consistent. They had Nedeljkovic, Anderson. These are guys that have been good but have not closed it when the moments mattered. Going to be will be fun ones to watch. The Colorado Vegas series, I don't think it's going to be close. I wouldn't be surprised if Colorado wins this in 5, maybe 6, if Vegas is lucky. Vegas will probably play a little bit more physical, but then, it is the Western Conference Finals, but Minnesota played them very physically. They played them really tight. There were several close games, and yet that still was done in 5. And this harkens back to what I said. At this point, it feels like months ago, that it's almost a shame that Dallas, Minnesota, and Colorado, only one of them could make the Western Conference Finals, because I don't think there's any doubt in people's mind that Dallas, Minnesota, and Colorado were the best 3 teams in the West, and maybe even 3 of the top 4 in the league. Because outside of Carolina, no one was quite as dominant this year as those 3 teams were from the East. But I love that I don't know what's going to happen. That's the beauty of hockey. And at least because the Predators are out, we get to watch. We don't have to feel the stress of a season of disappointment, because our disappointment has already soaked into our skin, and it will stay there tattooed on us for years, unless whoever the new GM ends up being is able to quickly look at this draft board and make sense of not only what position is Nashville going to draft, what player do they want to prioritize because of qualitative attributes as well. But we don't know what the strategy is going to be or what we think are good value picks down below. So, this was kind of all of a full circle moment here, getting to start with I didn't intend for it to be somewhat this seamless, where we would talk a little bit about the Nashville GM search, how that's tied to, all right, well, what are the options that are in front of us, how we've lacked a lot of key direction, and how then that has tied into the existing playoffs because of some of the draft capital that Nashville does have, and we'll have to hopefully utilize appropriately, as in if there's truly a player worth trading up for, or that they think is worth trading up for, do it. Obviously, don't. Otherwise, we won't be able to prove if it's a success for a couple years. And for any fan, there was actually a great video that I saw around the time of the NFL draft, and it showed people complaining when guys like Patrick Mahomes and J.J. Watt, Justin Jefferson all got drafted, because no one actually knows how good someone's going to end up being. For all you know, Gavin McKenna even continues to have off the ice issues. I don't know. I'm not rooting for that, but it's a possibility. For all you know, other guys just never really meet the moment. So we have to go for what we think is truly best, root for it. The GM is the pilot. It's a new GM. I'm not ready to create change yet. We don't even have the freaking GM. So it's a little bit of this, let's pause, let's wait and see. We'll continue to see as the draft gets closer. There will be a ton more shuffling in at least the first 10. We'll see if guys like Vigo, Bjork are even still considered first rounders. We'll see if there's a little bit more separation between the defensemen. Are Verhoff and Reed clearly the two? Do they separate? Is anyone going to leak a little bit more maybe of what they're focusing on? Will there be any trades up or down? This is why the draft is fun for teams with GMs. And that's probably the saddest moment that I have had right now, is just realizing that we still just don't have the structure. So it feels like a game of hope after 3.5 months, when we had the chance to we could have even had the new GM working on the deadline. That was even the saying at the time, was that the new GM would help with the deadline, and nothing's happened. So we'll see when the next recording comes out in another 2 weeks, if we have any new updates. Yeah, I'm willing to bet yes, just optimistically, that there's no way we're going to go into June without one. But at this point, I wouldn't even be surprised if we don't. I don't know what else there is to wait on, but I also don't know what there isn't to wait on. So, go Preds, and let's see what they're able to pull together, and any types of anything that gives us hope that there's direction coming for this offseason. At least there are some cool talent that they might be able to get at 10. Maybe not as impactful as Porter Martone would have been at 5 last year, but if some of those defensemen drop, they really might be. So there's hope. There's a little bit of hope. I'm not going to be blinded by my hope, but something that at least shows the team can be better next year than it was this year. And with that, I'm going to sign it off here. We're going to keep them a little bit shorter here in the offseason, because there's a little less to continue diving into on a game-wise. And as we keep going through the summer, we'll go on some more draft escapades. So enjoy the rest of the playoffs. Go either Canadiens and Sabres and Avs for the next round. And next up will be the Stanley Cup Finals. Thanks, everybody.
Swagger down the street with your red lips and funky beat. You better hold your head up to the sky. I'm gonna roll with you till the day I die.